Hi everyone, my name's Asha Andersen and I'm on the Executive Committee of the People's Inquiry 2020. This is an inquiry into the impacts and effects of toxic chemicals and poisons on our people, wildlife and environment. We're accepting submissions from around the country from people who have been harmed by toxic chemicals or poisons or have been witness to harm. We are also accepting submissions from people who are working on non-toxic solutions, and that's why I'm here today with Elisabeth Frankish from the New Zealand Gamekeepers and Possum Fibre company. So this is a company that was set up to act as a stepping stone to the formation of a cooperative that would help to address some of the issues around the use of aerial 1080 poison. So welcome, Elisabeth. Really excited to be talking to you today about this really amazing initiative that you're really kickstarting and getting underway. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
So would you just tell us, what is New Zealand Gamekeepers and Possum Fibre, and where did this idea originate?
New Zealand Gamekeepers is a concept developed by Guy Savage and myself in 2018, and we wanted to present the alternative to 1080. And we realized that simply asking for 1080 to be stopped wasn't going to reach a solution, so we thought, right, we need to make a solution. And we got on the phone and decided to establish a New Zealand Gamekeepers and with a trading arm called NZGK Possum Fibre. So of course, if we're going to pay trappers or future gamekeepers, we need a financial machine to be able to pay them, and so the idea is to recover the resources in the way of possum fibre, and in the future also fur and leather and possibly meat, and then sell those, and then that will generate the money to be able to pay the gamekeepers properly.
Fantastic. And so what is the gamekeeper for people at home that really might not have any idea around the concept of a gamekeeper? Would you help to explain that a bit?
Yes, a gamekeeper is actually an ancient occupation dating from medieval times in Europe, and a gamekeeper would normally be employed by the landowner of an estate, and that man, usually a man, would be responsible for the for looking after the wildlife that they want to preserve, for example pheasants, and deal with the animal species which predate the ones that they want to keep. So part of being a gamekeeper is culling the predating species, like foxes, I think, is part of it in those days anyway. But I think it's possible to transport that concept to New Zealand and remake it for the New Zealand situation, for the New Zealand bush, and also mountain landscape. So I'm not suggesting that we just borrow the British gamekeeper model, but accept in the barest concept.
Right, so an evolved version of a gamekeeper to suit.
Yes, for the New Zealand conditions and for the New Zealand bush, and but with the same sorts of ethics. I would like to borrow those ethics, which are high ethics. And a gamekeeper of the olden times would respect the animals that they had to cull, and they would recover the resources. They didn't like waste, and so the resources would be recovered, and their income would be paid with the recovery of those resources. So it's bringing back to life something that's very sensible and doesn't require the use of poisons.
Right. So the current situation is that all of those resources are lost. Would you explain a little bit more about that? You live on the west coast of the South Island of New Zealand. Would you explain a little bit about the dynamics in the forest there and what currently happens?
Well, yes. Currently, the forests, the 1080 poison operations are used to keep the numbers of possums down so that the forests can flourish in terms of the trees mainly. I remember in the 1980s going to the northern west coast and seeing mountainsides of grey trees. And the reason they were grey was that the possums' numbers had increased so much that they had eaten all of the leaves and the trees had died. And that made a huge impression on me. And I thought, what can we possibly do? So I can see the thinking behind 1080, but I've also I've witnessed the horrors of 1080 as well. And so I think 1080 is not the solution to the possum problem, and I think we need to look for something else.
Absolutely. My work as a trustee of flora and fauna really brings up, I really am very fascinated with our ability to bring livelihoods and care of nature together into alignment. So I see, you know, the role of a gamekeeper really is that kaitiaki role, you know, that goes far beyond, you know, the management of animals and really gets us tapped more into the ecosystem and understanding of, you know, the broader ecological living forests, you know, that we have. So bringing people back into the situation where they can be responsible rather than removing that from them, and then creating livelihood out of it, I think is, you know, that is how we move forward, I think, as kaitiaki of, excuse me, of the landscape.
Yes.
So the role of gamekeeper really does fit into that, and we have many people who are already kind of operating in a similar space, and it's so it would be bringing in that ethics as well. Would you tell us a little bit more about how you see this as an ethical model? What makes this ethical, and how would you go about ensuring that animals are ethically harvested?
First of all, I think that trapping, generally speaking, is more ethical than poisoning, because poisoning is so extremely cruel. And trapping, we have to admit, does inflict some suffering, but it's nowhere near the suffering of poisoning. So then we look at trapping, and overseas there are organizations in Canada and the USA who have invested resources into the development of humane trapping methods and practices. So, for example, if you were to lay soft leg hold traps, and then attend to those traps as soon as possible after the sun rises, then I think that is an ethical manner of harvesting the beautiful fibre of possums. The suffering has been minimized. And if I'm going to call them a gamekeeper, if the gamekeeper has been taught to swiftly dispatch that animal and not make a big deal out of it, just do it professionally and with respect for that animal, then I think that is far more ethical than aerial 1080 poisoning.
Absolutely. I think having the responsibility on a person who is there, you know, really does help to ensure that ethics is followed, you know, rather than having it being done remotely with poisons where you cannot guarantee how long it's taken the animal to die.
Yeah.
And it has all these other implications for the ecosystem and
Yes.
other animals as well. So would you share a bit about possum fibre? What's so great about possum fibre?
Possum fibre. Here's a little packet of our best possum fibre. And this is only 10 grams, so it's very, very light. And it's beautifully soft. And fibre artists, so fibre artists are like spinners, weavers, and felters, when they touch this and feel this, they get very excited about it, because they can imagine blending it with wool and spinning it into a beautiful soft yarn, or possibly making a felt with it. And fibre artists love to work with a raw fleece. Often they buy a single fleece from a sheep, and I think there's potential for us to sell possum fleeces as well to appeal to fibre artists. So the properties of it are, it has very high thermal insulation properties because the fibres are hollow like a polar bear, and so they trap the air and result in a very warm product. And also it's very light and very soft, so it's a very, very lovely fibre.
And so,
typically, sorry?
no, so could you tell us a little bit more about what exactly it could be used for? So fibre artists can use this to make into yarn.
Yes.
You mentioned
Yarn, where's my yarn? I
Mm.
didn't bring my yarn in. One thing is it can be used to make felt. So there's a little felted kiwi. I'm sorry, I've forgotten my yarn. Shall I run and get it?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Okay. This is just a little sample of our yarn. This was actually spun by Guy. He got it done. And I've sold out all of my yarn. And the customers in the USA are very excited about this and want more. Another product is roving, which is used by spinners. So they take a little bit of this, put it into their spinning wheel, and it produces a yarn. So this is actually possum and merino already blended into a roving. And we also sell tail fibre, which can be used to make things like fly fishing hooks.
Okay. Yep.
So fly fishermen, it's not a great market, but it's very interesting. It has that property. It floats on water because of the hollow fibre. And apparently is very good for catching fish. Also felt. So that's just a sample. I make these sample boxes, which we send out to the Fibre Arts Guilds, and they contain all our different grades of fibre. And in each box, I put a sample of felt and a little ball so that they can see the potential of what can be done.
So if someone wanted to buy one of those boxes, they would go to your website, is that right?
Yes. So you can buy them for yourself, or you can sponsor a box for someone else. So if you would like to support New Zealand Gamekeepers and this concept, people can sponsor a box, and then I'll send it out to a Fibre Arts Guild overseas and hopefully generate interest and customers.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we'll put your make sure we put your details at the end of this with the email and the website as well. And so, what's the response been like so far from people? It sounds like you're developing an international market for this.
Yes, slowly. I sent a sample box to a lady named Anne Frost, and she does a podcast in the USA, especially for knitters. And she devoted one of her podcasts to our sampler box and promoted it wonderfully, and I've noticed our sales have gone up slightly, which is great. So I've also had a big order from someone in California and sold out all my yarn, and she wants more. So that's very exciting to know that people actually want this fibre, but marketing is not my strong point. So I'm beginning a course at the moment to learn how to market online. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to generate more sales as we go along.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, I think you're doing a wonderful, wonderful job so far.
Well, thank you.
Now, so would you just share with us, why do you think that the cooperative model is the best model for the New Zealand Gamekeepers, and how do you see that working nationally?
I think that anyone who likes to work in the bush and the outdoors is essentially a freedom-loving person and doesn't like to be roped into a big system. And I relate to that myself. And I think, therefore, a cooperative model is probably the best approach to make it possible for people who, well, I would like to call them gamekeepers in the future, to do the training, become a gamekeeper, and then become a member of the New Zealand Gamekeepers Cooperative. That way they are free to come and go as at their will. And I think that's very important. And also for them to have ownership in the whole process and to have a say in the process. because I see my role simply as establishing things at the start of the whole thing, and then at some point in the future I'd like to stand back.
Yeah, fantastic. And so have you had much interest from trappers in New Zealand who want to be a part of this cooperative?
Yes, when Guy and I first started in 2018, we invited people to indicate their interest, and I have a stack of application forms about that thick from trappers. We called them our trapper forms. But since those days, I've evolved the concept to, I'd like to just simply talk about gamekeepers. I think it's very important to distinguish the difference between a trapper and a gamekeeper. So a trapper goes into the bush with the mindset of getting fur, but a gamekeeper is going to go into the bush with the mindset of conservation and what do I need to do to preserve the lives of these birds and to deal with the animals which may predate them in some way, or the trees. So
Yeah.
it's a different mindset.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, absolutely. And so that very much fits into to our Maori, the Maori world, you know, taking a more holistic view that really begins to look at the totality of our impact and pick up a more, I suppose, a deeper role in the ecosystem, in the management of the ecosystem. So, yes. Fantastic. So,
yes. I hope that yes, I hope that it may work along those lines in some way.
Absolutely, I see similar, you know, a similar desire from other groups around, you know, the country that are working, more as grassroots conservation groups, more as grassroots conservation work. That, however, if, you know, being able to tie in livelihoods to this, because often they're voluntary yes. groups, you know, and the real struggle is getting funding and succession, you know, having the longevity of the organization and the work that they're doing. Whereas incorporating, you know, a way of actually utilizing those resources and creating a livelihood that's based around caring for the environment, you know, that's absolutely the ultimate.
Yes, I'd love to see home-based industries, fibre arts, be regenerated and revitalised across New Zealand, especially using possum fibre, because this is so unique. And we have this wonderful opportunity to create unique jerseys and hats and all sorts of things and sell them direct from the maker, direct to the customer all over the world.
Absolutely, and the one of the key parts of that story is that when you buy possum fibre, you are helping to keep poisons out of our environment.
Yes.
And you're also helping to care for our ecosystem in a holistic way, while also contributing to livelihoods. You know, it's just, I see it as a win-win-win, really. Yeah, so I think it's amazing work you've been doing developing this fibre side of it that has not really been developed before.
It's brand new.
Yeah.
And even New Zealand fibre artists don't know how to work with possum fibre. So here's my little booklet I've been working on.
Okay.
And it's called How to Work with Possum Fibre for Fibre Artists. But it's quite funny for me to write it because I'm not a fibre artist. But I've done my best, and I've been asking people who are experienced for their advice, and I've just been creating updates. So this one's August 2020. And as we go along, I get more information from people who've experimented, and I've been writing down their feedback into this booklet. And so I make it clear at the very start that it's a work in progress. And in the back part of the book is information about why we're doing this. So it's an opportunity to educate fibre artists around the world about aerial poisoning and why we hope that they'll take the time to read and understand this difficult situation, and also understand how important their role, so this is the fibre artists, how important their role is in assisting us as New Zealand gamekeepers to produce possum fibre and it goes around like this. And if fibre artists can see themselves in that big picture, I hope it will give them additional sense of meaning when they buy this fibre.
Absolutely. So what's the next steps that you're wanting to take with this cooperative, and if people are interested in getting involved as a gamekeeper, you know, what's the next step for them?
There are a number of steps. So at the gamekeeper level, I think we need to clarify exactly what the philosophy is and code of practice, and then call for suitably qualified bushmen and bushwomen. So I'm looking for people who have a deep, intuitive understanding of the bush. I want to restore confidence in the human intuition of conservation rather than the scientific approach. I don't want to be anti-science, but I think we've gone too far away from that intuitive understanding of what needs to be done. And I'd like to restore that with New Zealand Gamekeepers. So I'm looking for people with that experience and that knowledge who understand this concept and would like to become a part of it. Then I'd like to bring those people together to do an analysis and development of training, and then develop the materials, and then begin to train a small team, and then run it as a pilot project on some land somewhere that needs conservation, and then gather, assess how it went, and gather feedback, and then improve. So the process of continuous improvement can be applied, and we can develop good training material. So that's New Zealand Gamekeepers, and I think we'll have to essentially make it up as we go along, but I'm only one person at this stage, so I'm just looking as far forward as I can. And then over here we have New Zealand Possum Fibre. So this is the role I'm focusing on at the moment, and I've just invested in an online marketing course. So I'm going to learn how to market possum fibre, and I hope that will make a big impact on sales. At the moment, I buy possum fibre from people who I trust, ethical trappers. But in the future, I would like that possum fibre to be delivered by trained New Zealand Gamekeepers. So it's all stepping stones at this stage. Okay. And then this part down here is understanding our market. So at the moment, I'm just focusing on the USA because that's where most of my customers are coming from. And in future, I'd like to look further afield. But baby steps at this stage.
Okay, fantastic. So if anyone's interested in getting in touch with you, your email is info@NZGK possumfibre.com. Yeah, and we'll put that at the end. So if there's any keen bushmen or bushwomen who are really interested in being a part of this process and the formation of that role of gamekeeper, and developing that role and the philosophy behind it, definitely get in touch with Elisabeth, because the sooner we can get this moving along, I think the better. It's such a fantastic concept, and I think it'll get wide support across the country. We really do need to be using these resources and acting far more ethically than we are. And the story, I think, of the possum fibre, New Zealand Gamekeeper Possum Fibre, is really one that I think will be really well supported, because it's absolutely fundamental towards caring for our ecosystem. And possum fibre, it really is, and the possum meat, once that eventually gets up and running, really is an important way to get people in the bush while also caring for the environment.
Yes, thank you very much.
Cool. Well, we'll definitely stay in touch with you along this journey and watch it develop. And I know that I'm up here in Northland, and there are a lot of people who would be interested in being part of this, when it's at the right time. People who are already already trapping, and you know, who'd love to be able to, you know, align their philosophy, you know, and actually make a proper living from doing it, you know. So
I'd love to see that happen too.
yeah. Fantastic, Elisabeth. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed talking to you today, and no doubt we'll chat with you again soon.
Thank you, Asha.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.